Hey guys, I'm Dov, and today I'm back with more Total War Warhammer 2 online action. We're here with Volkmar and his grill. Going to be taking a look at the Lore of Fire today. So we've got the Empire facing off against the Dark Elves, and we've got Volkmar's Crusade full-on fire damage build. So let's go ahead and take a look. So, Lore of Fire here. Of course, we've got our awesome-looking Bright Wizard with his sweet collar and staff. And fire damage is an aspect of the game that's very prevalent across a lot of different races, and also has some nice synergies. So in general, the Empire is one of those factions that has a lot of different fire damage, and the Bright Wizard is kind of the linchpin of that. So why is it important to have fire damage when you're bringing Lore of Fire in general? Or why is it helpful, I should say? Well, number one is Kindle Flame. So map-wide weakness to fire, 22%, which is quite a bit, for 15 seconds after you cast any spell. So already, units with the baseline fire damage are going to have an advantage in that respect. Of course, with the spells here, you can imbue fire and magic damage with Flaming Sword of Ruin, which is probably one of the best utility spells in Lore of Fire. Likewise, we've also brought Cascading Fire Cloak, which is melee defense and armor-piercing damage. Is a very nice, cheap buff, and also procs that Kindle Flame for only 4 winds of magic. Can be very, very useful. We've also got a Burning Head, which is the Burning Head, rather, which is a nice wind spell. Used to be a vortex, but now is a wind spell, aimable, and does have somewhat of a randomized element to it. It can veer off in a certain direction, but overall can do a lot of damage to low armor targets. Also applies that minus 8 leadership burnt effect, which is very, very useful. And that's pretty much it for the Bright Wizard. We'll look through the rest of the spells in the end screen here, of course. Volkmar the Grim does fire and magic damage as well. He's up on the cart, or his food truck, rather, with the banishment, so he's got that AoE damage. We've also got 2 Knights of the Blazing Sun, of course. These guys are a pure shock cavalry, make no mistake. 78 charge bonus, fire damage as well. Only 24 melee defense, 100 armor, which is lower than most other Empire cav, but still an excellent shock cavalry. And again, that fire damage combined with the Kindle Flame is going to be very strong. We've gone full on fire here. You can see the Luminarch of Hysh, the Templehof Luminarch even, loosing its first shot here right at my opponent's Shadow Sorceress. So we'll go ahead and just watch this impact in slow-mo as the fire magic armor-piercing laser bolt comes in and gets a brutal headshot right on that Sorceress. Gets her down to about 25% HP, so yeah. We've cast Flaming Sword of Ruin just to buff the missile damage here. Of course, Flaming Sword of Ruin is 25% weapon damage and missile damage, as well as being fire and magic. The Luminarch already does fire and magic missile damage baseline, but we're basically just juicing up its missile damage even more with that Flaming Sword of Ruin, as well as proccing that map-wide Kindle Flame in order to go full-on with the fire damage. We've also got a Warrior Priest here on foot with the Banner of Eternal Flame. That's going to give all units in that area of effect radius fire damage. So currently, it's going to be hitting these 2 Spearmen in the front line. And again, all this fire damage is meant to stack every time you cast that Kindle Flame. It'll give you a nice timing burst. We've also got Royal Althorp Griffites for the elite anti-large armor piercing. And yeah, main line of state troops here. We've got Spearmen up front with a couple of swordsmen. And that's pretty much it. We'll go ahead and kick it into full gear. As you can see, that Sorceress, that Shadow Sorceress of my opponent has already got blasted and is about to take another shot here that'll pretty much finish her off. So he's also got a Dreadlord, Sword and Board. We've got 2 Hargoneth Executioners, a single Witch Elf, 3 units of Dread Spears, 2 Black Ark Corsairs, 2, let's see here, Dark Shards with shields. He's also got a unit of Shades here, and 1 Dark Rider with Repeater Crossbow, so a decent Dark Elf army overall. Unfortunately, my opponent did lose his magic very early on in the battle, so that is going to be rough for him. You can see the balance power is still pretty close, though. Our next target is obviously going to be the Dragon. Luminarch of Hysh is meant for sniping out single model entities, so this Dragon is going to be the next target here. You can see we're coming in with a quick charge from those Knights of the Blazing Sun, just getting quick in and out, and then following up with Spearmen to fix them in place. Didn't quite have the money to get all Spearmen with shields, so the Spearmen out on the flanks do not have shields, which means they do actually have a lower attack interval, or sorry, a higher attack interval, which means it's worse overall. And they have less melee defense, so definitely whenever possible it is worthwhile bringing that the Spearmen with shields, definitely I would recommend. But we've got the Dreadlord with a Net of Ammontok. Again, they're going to be dropping a Flaming Sword of Ruin here in the front line to buff up the missile damage and just blasting that dragon in the face here with the Luminarch. You can see Hargoneth Executioners moving in here. They are going to do a lot of damage to these State Troop Swordsmen and Spearmen here. That being said, we're going to drop a Banishment right on top of them, and even if it does hit some of my own units here, because the Hargoneth Executioners are so much more expensive, it is going to be worthwhile for me. We've also got a Burning Head moving down the line, Overcast to give it some additional armor piercing, so it is going to do some pretty solid damage there. Not the most, but it also does apply that burnt debuff, so less leadership. And now we're going to follow up with the Royal Altar of Gryphites, just going for a quick terror route here. Volkmar on his chariot also causes terror, so when he gets in for a nice scything rear charge here, he's going to do a lot of damage. The dragon's going to come down and try and get on this Luminarch of Hysh here. But we're just going to hook the Royal Altar of Gryphites in and come in to finish it off. It only has about 10 to 15% HP left at this point, so he did manage to terrify away the Luminarch of Hysh, but at this point taking down that Dragon Lord is going to be very, very important. Volkmar himself still relatively healthy. He got into the back lines a little bit with the Knights of the Blazing Sun getting on some of those Dark Shards and so on. It's going to be very important to shut them down. You can see Volkmar is also coming back in the back line to do just that. Most of the Hargoneth Executioners have been dealt with, although they do have very good leadership, so they're going to be tough to take down in the late game. The Dragon is going to be able to get back up in the air, unfortunately. The Dark Riders being used very well here to screen out the Royal Altar of Gryphites. Of course, once the Royal Altar of Gryphites turn around and start to attack these Dark Riders, they are going to massacre them. But we still do have one more net in the pocket from that rally to Luminarch, and it does have a few more shots as well, so we're going to get that net cast and then try and finish off with the finish it off with the laser beam there. Fire Wizard relatively healthy as well. You can see the Dark Riders took a ton of damage from the Royal Altar of Gryphites and then got routed off. A little bit unfortunate for my opponent, but he honestly didn't have too many other options for getting his Lord out of that very unfavorable situation. That being said, at this point, ooh, very nicely dodged from my opponent there. Dodges that shot. Haven't quite dropped that net yet, but now we're going to be moving forward to do so. We've got the Royal Altar of Gryphites fighting against Hargoneth Executioners. They will take quite a bit of damage here because Hargoneth Executioners have really nice AP. But likewise, once they get too low on leadership, the Royal Altar of Gryphites will be able to terrify them away. We've got the back line for the Dark Elves is relatively secure, although we're trying to get everywhere we can with these Knights of the Blazing Sun here. You can see them coming in for a very cool cinematic charge. Likewise, we're wrapping up this unit of Dark Shards over here on the side. Going to have to be a little bit careful with Volkmar just because if he gets surrounded by Dread Spears and Witch Elves, it's not going to be the greatest situation for him. But we did manage to get down that Dragon Lord. Unfortunately, I did miss it. But here he is, lasered out of the sky. We're dropping another banishment on this nice pocket of infantry as well, routing off as much of them as possible. Fortunately, my Knights of the Blazing Sun are very, very tattered at this point, and it's going to be tough to keep them on the field with all these spears around. My opponent does still have some Witch Elves as well, keeping Volkmar enraged, so he's not able to pull away, and that's going to allow the spears to then get in and do some nice work. I should be pursuing these guys right here with these Knights of the Blazing Sun, or else getting on these shades here, but I'm going to mismicro them a little bit and decide, well, I guess this is not necessarily mismicro here, but I'm going to try and spring Volkmar loose, get a nice charge into the back of these Witch Elves. They don't have a lot of armor, so we will be able to get a lot of shock damage done on the charge, but unfortunately, as soon as they turn around and get attacks, I'm going to lose control of the Knights of the Blazing Sun, and then they're going to shatter. So a little bit unfortunate there, but, well, they didn't quite shatter. They may, but yeah, at this point it's mostly going to be a cleanup phase. We've got Black Ark Corsairs over here on the far side with the support of the Warrior Priests. My State Troops should be able to finish them off here. It's going to be a tough fight, but yeah, here comes the Warrior Priest. You can see him charging across the desert there. Hammer out for Sigmar. Going to be running in here and applying that nice fire effect. You can see that popping up now for the Swordsman and Spearman here. And he himself does a decent amount of splash damage, you know, being a heroic unit, kicking some Dark Elves in the face and so on. Balance of power is pretty heavily in my favor. We're just mopping up Hargoneth Executioners out towards the flanks and trying to keep Volkmar. We managed to get him back under control, so we're pulling away, trying to reform ranks a little bit here. We'll fast forward somewhat through this late game engagement, as it's mostly just going to be me cleaning up and then rallying my forces back together. So just trying to find an opening here with the Royal Altar of Gryphites and other Knights and so on, but my opponent doing a very good job screening out with these Witch Elves. We're going to come in with Volkmar, and unfortunately he's going to get enraged and start to take a lot of damage here, and if I were to lose Volkmar, my opponent might be able to come back in, but at this point we do get a nice little charge here with the Royal Altar of Gryphites. We're going to be able to pull Volkmar back away And yeah, basically I just need these the warrior priest and the fire sorcerer himself to rally. So we're gonna go ahead and fast forward a little bit more as Volkmar pulls back away. The last of the Knights of the Blazing Sun and the Royal Altar of Cryptites are probably going to shatter here. Looks like the Royal Altar of Cryptites did come back with 5 unit models there. We're bringing back the Fire Sorcerer as well, so at this point I'm just trying to find the best angle of attack, try and get all my forces rallied together, get a nice envelopment, you know, multiple attacks in the rear, and I do have just enough for one more Burning Head, so here it comes. Last Burning Head just scything across these Dark Shards, going to also hit these Shades and more, and every unit it does hit is going to apply that burnt debuff too. Then the Royal Altar of Cryptites get in here. They're going to provide the terror with Volkmar and the state troops coming in as well, and the burnt effect combined with the low leadership of the Dark Elves from their loss of leadership, you know, army losses and all that, it's going to make them much more susceptible to terror routing, and that is going to finally clean up army losses in what was a very, very close battle, a very fun battle. It's always fun to take Volkmar's Crusade out for a spin, and can potentially be very powerful, even against a faction that's not necessarily weak to fire damage like the Dark Elves. It still can be very, very powerful, just that fire synergy there. So yeah, sorry about my game locking up a little bit here, guys. It has been doing this quite a bit lately, so I apologize about that, but there we go. Just took a little bit to end the battle there. So yeah, in terms of the army breakdown here for my opponent, one of the unit Black Ark Corsairs did very well. The other one a little bit underperformed. The Dark Shards were able to get some nice kills done with the Shades, but not quite as much as they needed to. Same thing with these Hargoneth Executioners. They got some good work done, but at the end of the day, just getting taken out by the Banishment there was really rough. Likewise, the Templehof Luminarch generating some great value, taking down both the Sorceress and the Dreadlord. Royal Altar of Cryptites definitely helped in that respect and managed to rack up 152 kills while they were at it, so very impressive there. 142 on these Knights of the Blazing Sun and an XP Chevron, 85 and an XP Chevron. Knights of the Blazing Sun showing their worth there. 95 kills on Volkmar himself and 28 for the Bright Wizards. So overall, very fun battle. It's always a fun time using the Lore of Fire with Volkmar's Crusade. It's very thematic, I feel, and kind of fitting. So in terms of the rest of Lore of Fire here, whoops, not that one. If we go into the custom battle screen here, we can look at so who has access to the Lore of Fire? Well, Dark Elves for one, they have a sorceress with access to Lore of Fire. The High Elves have Flaming Sword of Ruin. They don't have any other fire spells at the moment. I'm really hoping that they'll get a Fire Mage eventually, because I think it's kind of silly that they don't have one already. But Teclis does have Flaming Sword and Kindle Flame, so you can still get some good value there. They also have a lot of fire damage with their monsters. You know, the dragons all do fire damage, and the Flamespire Phoenix. In terms of other factions, of course, sorry about my voice, guys. Still a little raw. I've been working hard all weekend, so apologize about that. Empire, we looked at, they have lots and lots of fire damage. And the Warriors of Chaos are the other main one. They've got Archaon, the Ever-Chosen, of course, is the only legendary lord in the game to have the full Lore of Fire. So we'll go ahead and look at him just for looking at the other spells here. So we looked at these 3 spells here. Fireball is a magic missile, which can actually be really decent in certain situations. If you're facing the Wood Elves, for example, and your opponent brings a Branch Wraith, Fireball can just about 1 to 2 shot him if you, well, I don't know about 1 shot him, but maybe 2 to 3 shot him if you overcast one of them. It can do a lot of damage. Not the most damage. It also is relatively slow moving as well, but against units that are weak to fire, it's going to be very good. And just as a reminder, guys, Norska's coming, and they're weak to fire damage. So all of this video is going to be very pertinent to Norska. The Fireball will be good at sniping out the Skinwolf Werekin. Flaming Sword of Ruin is going to be really nice for taking down units that have the Enrage, which gives them physical resistance in the late stages, and against the Skinwolves as well, who are weak to fire damage, or, you know, Throg himself, or the Ice Trolls are all weak to fire damage. The other 2 spells, the high tier spells, are both area of effect damage spells that do a ton of damage. Flamestorm is just insane. It does just ludicrous amounts of fire and magic damage. It is relatively slow moving if you overcast it. It is very expensive at 20 Winds of Magic, but if you overcast it, it moves slower and it lasts longer and it does more damage. So Of all the Vortex, I think this is probably one of the most powerful if you overcast it. Piercing Bolts of Burning is a bombardment spell that does a ludicrous amount of armor piercing damage. Very good against elite cavalry or infantry in particular. So going to be good against potentially factions like the Wood Elves, or sorry, not the Wood Elves, the High Elves. You just don't want to use it on Dragon Princes, but Chaos as well, it's pretty good against them. Various factions are going to bring elite tier infantry or cavalry, so definitely recommend that. What matchups is Lore of Fire good in? Well, it can be good in a multitude of matchups, but in particular, if you're fighting the vampire counts, they have a lot of units that have that standard regeneration trait, which makes them weak to fire damage, so it can be good against them. Likewise against the Wood Elves. They have the tree units, which are all weak to fire damage. They also have a lot of physical resistance units, like Sisters of Thorn, for example, which if you're caught up in melee with Sisters of Thorn and you cast that Flaming Sword of Ruin, they're suddenly going to lose the advantage of that massive 50% physical resistance, so it can be very good against the Wood Elves as well. Likewise, against factions that tend to have a lot of missile resistance, like Skaven. A lot of their elite tier infantry, Death Runners, Plague Monks, and more have physical resistance, so it can be good there. Likewise, the area of effect damage spells are going to be pretty good against the Skaven also. Let's see. Against Bretonnia, believe it or not, I actually think the Lore of Fire for some factions is going to be pretty decent if you don't have access to some other tools. But because a lot of the Bretonian cavalry has physical resistance, particularly the high tier cavalry like Grail Knights and Grail Guardians, can be pretty good there. Again, the area of effect damage spells are going to be good for clearing out peasant infantry as well. So just a few thoughts on the Lore of Fire. Let me know, guys, in the comments down below what you want to see next and your own thoughts on the Lore of Fire. It's definitely one of the flashier lores in the game and very, very useful. A lot of people think it's one of the worst lores of Magic, but I think in a multitude of situations, especially for factions that can bring a lot of fire damage to the table in the first place, like the Empire, can be a very, very strong lore of Magic. So let me know what you guys think in the comments down below. Hope you guys enjoyed watching. If you like this kind of content, like and subscribe, and be sure to hit that bell notification button so you're notified when I upload new videos. Thank you very much for watching, and we'll see you next time.